All right, we're going to do this again. Welcome to Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf, and we're going to continue this discussion talking about materialism, sort of. We're talking about really its determinism. It's reared its ugly head up again. And just to be clear, I want to clear up one thing. I called the person that we're focusing on Sabine Hossenfelder. I kept saying Hossenpfeffer, and that's not her correct name, and I apologize for that. That's sorry. Um, Hossenfelder. I'm going to make that correction, and I apologize. Um, but there's really sort of two parts to this discussion, and I want to make it clear. The last couple of episodes, I was talking about from a more of a psychological approach to what she's saying, because I really think it's bigger than the topic of determinism. Listen, determinism, while it's an interesting topic, I do. I love reading about it. It seems to be, to me, just the dumbest idea in all of philosophy. Whether it's theistic determinism, the materialistic, if you're an atheist and you're a determinist too, um, it just, it's this crazy, it's like falling down, it's like being Alice and falling down the rabbit hole, because it's the the machinations, the twists of logic that's necessary to hold this idea afloat is maddening. And then you couple that with the fact that at least the people that I've encountered, the books that I've read, the lectures that I've seen, the people talking about it, even Sabine Hossenfelder here, not one person who advocates or asserts that determinism is true behaves as if determinism is true. Not a one that I've encountered. Everybody acts like determinism isn't true. And even in the beginning of the video, if you haven't seen it in the last episode, I'll play a little bit of it again. She talks to you as if you can make decisions on your own, that if the things that she's saying will influence your decision, and that whatever her interaction is, whatever she's doing on her little video, will influence you to make a decision that will have an effect on the as yet undetermined future. That's how she behaves. That's how every person behaves who says determinism is true, which again makes you feel like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. So I don't really think the determinism is the big thing, although we're going to spend some time looking at it because, again, I find it fascinating. It really doesn't matter if it's true or not, because everybody's going to behave as if it is not true. So it really doesn't matter. What I think is really more important is the approach, because I think Sabine's approach is emblematic of a lot of people. I don't want to say just today. I think this has probably been throughout the history of time. I think it's a bad idea to think that suddenly today things are happening that haven't happened in the future. I don't think there's anything new under the sun. It's probably new to us. But people will oftentimes see the world in such a way and frame it as if you don't see it the way I see it. It's not that you're seeing something different than me. No, you have a problem. There's something wrong with you. And I'm in here with the good people who think like me. And you're out there with the bad people who don't think like me, which is an idiotic position to take. Because just from the perspective of this, if you have just a sliver of self-awareness, you would understand that you're not right every time you think you're right. I know from my own case, and I imagine if you're honest with yourself, you can look back at a time and go, boy, I really thought I was right that time. I thought everything said, all the evidence pointed to the conclusion that I was coming, and it turned out that I was wrong. I think everybody has that experience. So it would seem, again, the self-awareness part, that you go, listen, this is how I think it is, but, could be wrong. And there's nothing like that in Hossenfelder's presentation, which makes you dogmatic. And really, and this is what I see oftentimes, because I know people go, well, religious people believe in God. I'll tell you, I see religious fundamentalism in her presentation insofar as, listen, anytime you get this concept where whatever it is that I'm saying or thinking or believing, it's impossible that it's wrong, and everybody who doesn't agree with me is a something, a denier, a ist, racist, the science denier. Just because you don't see the things my way, now you're out there. That's a fundamentalist position. That's a religious position. That's not an intellectual position. An intellectual position says that, listen, here's my data, here's my evidence. This is how it looks, but let's see what you got. And let's weigh it all and see how it comes out. You don't find that very often, unfortunately. And I think that Hossenfelder is an extreme example of the fundamentalist, scientistic, religious position when it comes to science. And what I mean, there's this idea of scientism where some people think that and there's a lot of prominent scientists out there think that the only knowledge that can be gained is through the materialist paradigm of science. So if you couldn't test it in a lab, or you can't, measure it in some way, if it's not matter, energy, that kind of, then there's no way you can, it doesn't matter. And I think you can hear her talk about philosophers in this video that she does with a little tinge of derision there. Because many scientists, E.O. Wilson's another one, who feels like philosophy, those people aren't really doing anything. It's really just the scientists. We're the people who know everything. That's scientism. And it's a religious view. It's not a scientific view, at least not in my opinion. It mirrors more of what you would find in what people characterize as religion, and not just regular religion, but extremist religion. That's the sense I get from Hossenfelder. And I just wanted to play an example before we get into the data. I just wanted to play you an example because when I heard did I say it again? Hossenfelder. I'm going to just say Sabine. How about that? Sabine. So when I heard Sabine, I immediately thought of this other guy. But let's listen to Sabine again just to refresh our memories, because she's very, very, very adamant about her position. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go.
Common property that if you have an initial condition at one moment in time, for example, the exact details of the particles in your brain and all your brain's inputs, then you can calculate what happens at any other moment in time from those initial conditions. This means in a nutshell that the whole story of the universe in every single detail was determined already at the Big Bang. We're just watching it play out. These deterministic laws of nature apply to you and your brain because you are made of particles, and what happens with you is a consequence of what happens with those particles. A lot of people seem to think this is a philosophical position. They call it materialism or reductionism and think that giving it a name that ends on ism is an excuse to not believe it. Well, of course you can insist to just not believe reductionism is correct, but this is denying scientific evidence. We do not guess, we know that brains are made of particles, and we do not guess, we know that we can derive from the laws for the constituents what the whole object does. If you make a claim to the contrary, you are contradicting well-established science. I can't prevent you from denying scientific evidence, but I can tell you that this way you will never understand how the universe really works. So the trouble...
She's pretty dead set on her position, right? There's an initial set of conditions, and because of the differential equations and we're particles, that from the Big Bang, from the initial, from the singularity, everything was determined, and we're just sitting watching it play out. And this goes back to when I say that no determinist actually believes what they're saying. Because if she really believed that, then my question is, what is she even doing the video for? If she really believes that whatever is going to happen is going to happen and it's already been determined, what is she doing? Because it seems like she thinks she's convincing somebody from doing A to do B. As if, again, as I said, the future's not determined yet. It doesn't make sense to me. And again, I don't really think she's, well, I know she says she's a determinist. I don't think she believes it for a second. So you can see the dogma. And in my opinion, it's this idea that, again, if you don't understand it the way I do, then you're just wrong. And even the idea that, it's called materialism, and the reason it's called materialism is not whether or not so you can believe it or not. It's just simply to identify the idea, what we're talking about, just so we know we're both talking about the same thing, and that's clearly a materialist idea, this reductionist idea. So let me I'm gonna show the video of this person who I thought of immediately when I heard this video. This happened when I was doing a little bit of research for the Alan Parr video that I did, and this guy's video came up. I haven't seen the whole thing. I just saw the beginning of it. Are you okay back there? I just saw the beginning of it, and when I saw Sabine do her thing, I immediately thought of this guy. Both dogmatic, both dug into this position of there's no way I could be wrong about this, and anyone who disagrees with me is one of them. Now, the parallel name to call somebody when they don't believe your particular way of understanding the world in the religious world is heretic. And what Sabine is calling people who science denier is the same thing as heretic. You're going against the church, right? Same idea. So listen to this guy, and I'll show you why I think, again, it's just not something that I think reasonable people see and go, wow, that's somebody I want to listen to. It makes you look dumb. Take a look at this.
Well, welcome.
So this is a guy named Jordan Riley. He's got a show called Real Talk on the YouTubes. And again, before I get into this, I'm not banging on him as a person. I don't even know him. He seemed like a nice enough guy. Same thing with Sabine. I'm simply saying that the attitude comes across, and it makes, in my opinion, when I see that, I go, what an idiot. Why are you doing that? Why don't you relax a little bit? Because if what you're saying is true, people will get it. And if they don't, there might be a reason why people aren't following along.
Welcome to Real Talk with Jordan Riley, where the real talk does not come from me. It comes directly from God's word. And
now, I want to just pause right there. There's not a whole lot, so I'm not going to be cutting it a lot, but you heard what he just said. The talk isn't coming from me. Okay? It's directly from God's word. Now, hopefully, I don't know, maybe you don't, but I see a parallel here. What this gentleman, Jordan Riley, is saying seems to be getting across is, when I'm talking, it's exactly what the Bible says. And there's no way to understand it other than the way that I'm telling you it says. Okay. Sabine's telling you the same thing. Right? When I'm looking at differential equations and particles, it's reductionism and determinism, and anybody who sees it differently, well, you're just wrong. So you've got Jordan Riley here telling you that he's talking for God, in a sense, right? He's God's spokesman here, in a sense, because whatever it says in the Bible, that's what he's saying. He's not talking to me. It's not Jordan Riley. It's the Bible talking to you, okay? Sabine's saying the exact same thing. It's a fundamentalist religious attitude towards information. I'm telling you, you just slow down a little bit. Take a little speed out when you're in the turns, because you go right off the side of the road. So let's go back to it. Just be careful when you start claiming that what you're saying is equal to ultimate perfect truth. That's what I'm saying. Just that may not be the case. All right, where are we back? All right, here we are.
today we're going to discuss the beat with Alan Parr. And I have serious concerns. And I'm telling you right up front, like we talked about with the glass of water earlier, there's a lot in common with Alan and this glass. This glass has a pinch of rat poison inside of it right now. Can you tell? No, it actually looks good on the outside. But if you were to taste it, it would be disgusting. Or it could make you sick, or if you drank this, it could kill you. And that's what false teaching does. And many false teachers out there, they'll teach some truth. They'll slap a Jesus sticker on it like Joel Osteen. You know, they'll make it sound, oh, it's so wonderful, and I'm teaching. He used a couple Bible verses. But did he really teach what God said, or did he rip them out of context? Is he sharing his opinion, or is he sharing what Jesus actually said? And I'm going to.
So there's a little bit, in my opinion, of projection going on there. He's saying, are these people giving you their opinion, or are they telling what God really said? Well, in his mind, what he thinks, this isn't his opinion. He's telling you what God really said. And I'm always cautious of people who conflate their understanding of the world with a perfect understanding of the world. And that's what I think this guy Jordan Riley's doing. Again, I'm not saying he's a bad person or a mean person or anything like that. And if you go on, I got a separate video cooking for this whole thing with Jordan Riley. But I just wanted to show you, to me, there's a parallel. When people say religious people are nutty, Sabine sounds exactly the same way. Because you're right. There are certain religious folks who can get really nutty. You won't hear me deny that for a second. I think in the science community, people who say they don't believe in God or don't have a God, which I think is wrong, I'm telling you, Sabine's coming from the same place. My knowledge of science is perfect. So if you disagree with me, you're out there. It's and you know what I think at some level? Well, I'll tell you what. So I believe God is real. And I believe Jesus is his son. I believe Jesus died and was raised on the third day. And I think he's at the Father's right hand today. And I think that my whole existence depends on that. I think Jordan Riley would say something similar. So in that sense, we're connected. We're kind of in the same camp, if you will. I'm embarrassed by those kinds of things, which is why you don't hear me calling myself Christian or anything like that. I don't even go to church. I don't even go to church. I don't like the association with certain people who claim that same name, because in my opinion, the bar's very low. Thankfully, it's a low bar, and I appreciate that. I'm glad it is. You want everybody to get in. But unfortunately, you get some people sometimes who are a little bit too, crazy about it. Or I take that back. Not about it, but about themselves. And I think they take themselves just too seriously. And for whatever reason, they have a fear that somebody might see something in a different way. That's Jordan Riley, and that's the first person I thought of after I saw Sabine give her presentation. We know this, she tells you. We don't think, we know. Really? Look, this is, and I've mentioned this guy many times, but I think he's the perfect example. This is a book by Thomas, let me find his name. Here it is. Thomas Nagel. I couldn't think of his name. Called Mind and Cosmos. Look what Thomas Nagel writes in the title. It says, why the materialist neo-Darwinian conception of nature is almost certainly false. Now, just so you know, if you don't know, Thomas Nagel's a materialist, or at least he's a physicalist, and I'm not sure what the distinction is between the two. I almost fell down. I'm not sure what the distinction is, but you could put her, just like me and Jordan would be kind of in the same camp, at least on some of the main things. You can put Thomas Nagel and Sabine in the same camp. And Thomas says, Sabine don't know what's going on. But Sabine has already cast Thomas into the netherworld of heretic, scientific heretic. That's what a science denier is. That's what it means. It's the religious terminology that scientists use to make heretics of people who don't agree with them. Same idea. So that's somebody else you'd be casting out. Thomas Nagel, who's one of the most brilliant philosophers of science of his time. But hopefully you didn't miss this important thing. Look at Thomas Nagel. Mind and Cosmos, why the materialist neo-Darwinian conception of nature is almost certainly false. You know what that is? Humility. Listen, Thomas Nagel's got his facts down. I couldn't more highly recommend that book. And I don't understand all. I mean, listen, I got lost in a lot of places, but the arguments that he uses to establish his opinion are fantastic. But he's still going, I'm not closing the door on anything. That's why it's almost certainly false. Just leaving the door a little bit open, right? Slowing down, going into the turns. I'm going to slow down, right? Be careful. Sabine has abandoned all regard for safety. It's such an irresponsible position that she's taken. Meanwhile, you have somebody in her camp who disagrees with her who says, listen, I think you're wrong. Almost certainly wrong. But there's none of this, if you disagree with me, you're out of the scientist community. That's fear, that's insecurity, that's ignorance. And I don't care if it's not in science, if it's out in the world. Oh, you have this opinion about black folks, you're a racist. You're talking to an idiot. That's an idiot's response. And people who do this don't want to debate about the issues. They don't want to hear your opinion or even try to understand your opinion, because if there's something true in your opinion, it's possible they have to abandon theirs. And that's what they're afraid of. It's not that there's information out there they don't have. Many will admit that. They've already dismissed it. It's that if they give that information a fair hearing, it's possible that they may have to give up their opinion or their view of the world. And that's the fear. That's why people say things like that. That's why Jordan Peele, I think it's his name, Jordan Peele, that's why he's getting so nuts about this. Who cares what Alan Parr is saying? You know what well, I'll tell you. Well, it's not really. That's a whole different topic. I'll do a video on that one. But my point is this. When people get so dogmatic, it's not about, just understand, you're not even dealing with whatever it is. Politics, society, sports, science, theology. Just know, you're no longer even talking about the issue anymore. What you're dealing with is somebody who's insecure, fearful, and probably understands that their opinion is pretty weak. And they're trying to protect themselves from any information that would make it clear, yeah, I got to give up that opinion. Because that's just, they don't want to do that. There are very few people who have enough courage, like Thomas Nagel, to go, listen, I don't even want anything to do with God. He makes that pretty clear. But this materialism stuff, this physicalism, it ain't cutting it. It doesn't explain what's going on in the world. Now, I don't know how much time I've gone so far, but let me just get this in. This might go a little bit longer, but I want to at least introduce to you some of the data. I've gone on enough about the psychological aspects and my impressions of it, but who cares? Because I could be wrong with all that. What do I know? But let's hear some people who are very well schooled in the subject, got all the the academic requirements. They're very smart people. Because here's the problem with materialism. Well, not the problem. Here's one of the problems with materialism, and there's two that I'm going to deal with. The first problem is what they call the location problem, and I think I hinted at that or talked about that a little bit in the last video. The location problem is simply this. If you have some idea, then there has to be a place for it, the thing that you're trying to explain, inside the idea. It's like my wife. She never watches. She has this purse. It's like Batman's utility belt. It's got everything in there. You whatever happens, your car breaks down, somebody attacks you, in the alley, you get a cold or something. There's something in her purse for that. That'll help you out of that adventure. Well, when we're going out, if we're going out someplace nice, on a date or something like that, she gets all, in a nice little dress. She'll have a purse that's like the size of a credit card. It's a tiny little thing, with long straps, sparkles or diamond crusted. I don't know what it is, but it's this tiny little purse. And she's got to start tossing out all of the stuff that she normally has in there. And she can keep like a couple of credit cards, lipstick. I got to carry the keys. I got to carry her cell phone and all that stuff because their purse just doesn't have the capacity to carry all the stuff that she normally carries around. Okay. That's the location problem. There are things that we know that are real that don't fit inside of materialism. That's one of the problems that materialism has. Things like the mind. Most people, I shouldn't say most, doesn't really matter how many people think. But there are very strong arguments that we have a mind, an immaterial something that is us, that directs and controls and works with our body to navigate this particular car. The way I think about it, it's like you and your car. You would be the mind or the soul, and your car would be your body. And you get in your car and you drive around, you manipulate it, it does what you want to do. And even if your car, hits a tree and breaks down, you don't die. You might have to get a new car. Of course, I'm not saying that that's the case. The analogy breaks down right about there. But my point is, there's strong arguments for the existence of the mind. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, in materialism or physicalism, there's no place for that. Because what materialism says is only material things are real, and the mind is immaterial. So that poses a problem. There's another problem, one that we're going to get into today, is called Qualia. Qualia, I think is how they say it. And Qualia basically talks about your first person experience. That's something that materialism is just can't put its fingers on. It's outside of materialism. So those two things, the mind, Qualia, other things like that, can't be located in the story that materialism paints about reality. That's the location problem. The other problem we're going to get into, and this will not be this time, but hopefully next time we'll get to it, is called the causal closure. Causal closure is this. Materialism, let's just talk about specifically what Sabine was talking about. Sabine was basically saying that all of reality is basically just dominoes, right? Just matter and energy. And one domino knocks down the next domino, which knocks down the next domino. So, like she says, if you know the initial conditions, you know what's going to happen all the way down the road. And we're just sitting back and watching it, even though it seems like she's not just sitting back and watching it. She's trying to get in there and fix stuff. But that's a different thing. Well, if that's the case, then materialism has this problem. One, what started this chain of events? Because infinity past doesn't work for reasons that I think we've talked about before, but we'll probably talk about it again. So the question is, well, what started this whole chain of events? And it seems like whatever started it could not be a material thing. Well, causal closure says that only material causes can be present in the world, in reality, if you're a materialist. So if something immaterial exists, then it blows up the whole idea of materialism. Because causal closure says only physical things, material things, can cause things. So that's why they have problem with things like the mind, that kind of stuff. So those are the two things we're going to talk about. So let's first get into Qualia. And there's this guy named Frank Jackson, not the guy from what is it? Lord of the Rings? Not that Frank Jackson. This Frank Jackson is a philosopher from Australia, I believe he is. And he came up with this thought problem. He's one of his specialties, I think, is the philosophy of mind. And here gives sort of a synopsis of this argument. But let me give you tell you a little bit about it before I get into it, just to give you the basic idea, because it gets technical, not really technical. But here's the idea of Qualia. Qualia is this idea that, for example, so if I see something blue, like behind me the wall is blue. Now I know what I'm seeing. And I assume that if you're seeing it too, I assume you're seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, that the color that I see is the color that you see. But the problem is, there's no way that I can actually know that you see the exact same color. I mean, for all I know, it could be some color that I've never encountered, and for your whole life, you've been calling it blue. Just like I'm calling this blue. And if we were to compare the two colors somehow, maybe they might be different colors. But there's no way for me to know that. So I assume when I say something's blue and you say something's blue, I just assume it's the same thing because I can't have your first person experience of blue. Same thing if we were eating, if we're both, eating an orange and you give me half of the orange and we're both eating the orange, I know what I'm tasting, but I don't know what you're tasting. I simply assume that you're tasting the same thing that I am, and the flavor is the same for you. But the problem is that if I understand correctly, there's no way scientifically for me to know what your experience is like. I know what I experience, but I don't know what your experience is. And there's no way scientifically or in a materialist paradigm to capture that information. Thomas Nagel has a great example of when he talks about bats. The idea is that you could know everything from a physical standpoint or a materialist standpoint. You can know everything about a bat, but you can never know what it's like to actually be a bat. You know, you can never have the bat experience unless you're actually a bat. That's a first-person idea. That's the idea of quality, of a being's first-person experience of something is qualia. And apparently that's outside of the materialist paradigm. So here's the example that Frank Jackson came up with to talk about that issue. And I'm just going to read it and talk, and just, you know, we're not going to go get into a bunch of detail here just for time, because I've been, who can listen to me yammer for too long? Okay, here we go. Here's the basic idea. Frank Jackson, this is 1982, formulated the intuition underlying his knowledge argument in a much cited passage using his famous example of the neurophysiologist Mary. I just wanted the other word. I didn't like this word. Mary's a brilliant scientist who is, for whatever reason, forced to investigate the world from a black and white room via a black and white television monitor. She specializes in the neurophysiology of vision and acquires, let us suppose, all the physical information there is to obtain about what goes on when we see ripe tomatoes or the sky, or use terms like red, blue, and so on. She discovers, for example, just which wavelength combinations from the sky stimulate the retina. Oh, I lost my position. Oh, and exactly how this produces via the central nervous system the contraction of the vocal cords and the expulsion of air from the lungs that results in the uttering of the sentence, "The sky is blue." What will happen when Mary is released from her black and white room or is given a color television monitor? Will she learn anything or not? It seems just obvious that she will learn something about the world and our visual experience of it. But then is it inescapable that her previous knowledge was incomplete? But she had all of the physical information, ergo, there is more to have than that. And physicalism is false. And then it goes just below that. It says, the argument contained in this passage may be put like this. Mary has all the physical information concerning human color vision before her release. But there's some information about human color vision that she does not have before her release. Therefore, not all information is physical information. So that's the basic idea. She's in this room. All she's ever seen is black and white, but she knows everything that there is about vision, sight, taste, all that stuff. But when she goes outside the room, suddenly she experiences something that she's never experienced. And the assertion that Frank Jackson is making is she's now learning something new, that is the actual color or the actual experiences that she's been studying. And so if that's the case, then there's something other than the physical. There's some experience that you can have, even though you have all of the physical data down. There's something out there that can only be captured by non-physical means. I haven't really said that properly, but that's the basic idea. Now, I'm not telling you who's right and who's wrong. I know what I think and I know what I believe. What I'm simply pointing out is that Sabine's pedantic, dogmatic version of reality has many very intelligent, very accomplished people who know at least as much as she does about science, philosophy, etc., who say that's not the way it is. And so the only real point I'm making, and we'll have other examples, is that there's no reason for her to be so idiotic or to act that way. And again, I'm not saying she's an idiotic, I'm saying she's bad or anything. I'm saying that she should have a friend somewhere who should come up to her and say, hey, Sabine, relax. It's okay if people disagree with you. Some people look at the same information and they come to a different conclusion. That's okay. It's all right. Everybody doesn't have to believe. Listen, if I was her friend, that'd be the first thing I'd say. I'd call her up and say, hey, Sabine, I saw your video. Sweetheart, slow down in the turns. Just relax a little bit. Give your information, give your arguments, and let people make up their own minds. But you don't have to say that, oh, they're the bad guy, they're evil, or a this or a that, or a denier, because they don't agree with you, because they have other information that they'd like to consider and that they think has some significance. Just don't be like that. You don't need to. So I'm going to leave it at that. Think about that knowledge argument. Look it up. It's pretty easy to find. You can just go Frank Jackson. I put in Mary the Scientist and got it. But it's very interesting. And I'll tell you what, I never had even thought about things like that. Because, again, I always think that everybody, when I'm looking at blue, I'm sure everybody else is seeing the exact same color. But I don't know. I just assume it. And I don't know that there's any test you can go to say that, yeah, I'm looking at blue. Because again, even if somebody got you and a friend of yours and put something blue out there and you both said, yeah, that's blue, there's no way I know that what you're calling blue was some color that I've never experienced. But you're just calling it blue. And so every time you see it, when I say blue, you say blue, but it's not the same color. I don't know. I don't even know if that's true. I don't know if that works like that, but I'm just saying, boy, when I read that thing, I'm like, man, that was pretty fantastic. Listen, lots of ideas out there. Do yourself a favor and explore for yourself and stay away from people. I shouldn't say stay away from people, but I'm just saying, just remember, when somebody starts getting dogmatic like Sabine or Jordan over there, you're talking to somebody who's temporarily lost their senses. They're having a bad day. They've lost all self-awareness for that moment, and hopefully they have somebody who loves them who'll come along and go, hey, listen, I get what you're saying. I understand the point you're trying to make, and it's not necessarily a bad point, but I don't know. You don't you don't have to get so nutty about it because it makes you look bad. And I'll bet you there are atheists and materialists out there who see that and go, oh gosh, now everybody's going to think I'm like that too because I think materialism is true. And they don't. There are many, many reasonable people out there who think the opposite of how I see it. It's just that you always do that. It always happens where you get the extreme nutty people in any group of people. When I say extreme nutty, again, I'm just saying they take it too far. And it's really not even about the idea. It's about their weakness and their insecurity. And they're out there screaming all these things in the name of whatever this thing that you happen to be. And you have to go, now everybody thinks I'm like that. I get that all the time. Everybody thinks when I'm walking around town, everybody looks at me like I'm gonna fly off the handle if they say anything that might be considered racist. And I'm like, relax. I don't care. I'm not one of those, sensitive folks, or I'm not a BLM. But because they're the mouthiest, the ones who get all the headlines, who scream and whine about everything all the time, just because I look like them, I must be like them. And it's frustrating when the extreme people in your group take it over. Now everybody thinks like that, or everybody thinks that you're one of those. All materialists, all physicalists aren't like Sabine. Frank Jackson. I don't know if Frank Jackson, he might be a physicalist. I don't know. But Thomas Nagel, very reasonable man. I'm sure there are many, many, many out there. So you don't have to always agree. It's okay. And you can learn something from people who think the opposite of you. That's why it's a bad idea to try and use rhetorical coercion to force everybody to agree with you. because now you just become blind. There are things that they know from a perspective that you don't have, and now you've lost that information because you forced them to give it up so they agree with you. It's dumb all around. It's just always a bad idea. All right, I've talked enough. Thanks for tuning in Uncolored, and I appreciate your guys' continued support. People keep popping on every week, and I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, I really, really appreciate that. Continue to put your comments and emails and stuff. I haven't answered a lot of them, but I'll get back on to that. And next year, we're at the end of the year. Be safe during the holidays. Please be safe during the holidays. And next year, God willing, because I may not be here, but hopefully I will be. Stupid. Hopefully I will be, but we're going to change the format up just a little bit and start talking about some more popular things. Not just me, but I'm hoping to have some folks on, some guests that I invited, some people that I think you'll like. And we'll do a little bit more popular topics rather than stuff that's so philosophical. Although I love talking about it all the time, I imagine people can get bored of talking about this stuff all the time. So anyway, thanks again for tuning in Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf. Didn't I say goodbye already? All right, get out of here. That's enough.